Sorry, I could have dialed in 10 minutes early to sort all
No,
this.
no, no.
No, this is why we book in, because we know it happens with everyone. Trust
It
me.
happens every time. Yeah,
It's
don't worry.
Okay,
Brilliant. Well,
good.
thanks so much for taking the time to come and chat to us today. We really appreciate it. We think it's a really important discussion point to have, and with someone that's so knowledgeable, we're really honored to chat to you.
It's a great name. It's a great name.
Thank you.
I loved it.
Thank you.
I'll do that. That sounds great.
Yeah, we were so surprised.
Right.
We thought someone must have this name, surely, but no.
It's a good name.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good morning, Sophie Sabbage, all the way in Kent. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ridiculously Human podcast. How's your morning been? How's the start to your day been?
Well, thank you for having me. It's a very glorious, wintry summer day here. Well, summer day, blue sky, wintry summer day. That didn't make sense. It's just blue sky, lots of sun. And I've been getting my daughter ready to go to Legoland with her dad. It's half term. So I'm glad they've left the building.
Yeah. I must say,
a nice, peaceful house for the day.
Oh, that's cool. I must say, Legoland sounds like the most exciting place ever. I had so much Lego as a kid, like I would have just been in heaven in that place.
I took her once before. She called it the best day of my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but for me, I took her high summer. It was packed. I mean, the queues were like 2 hours long. I ranked it amongst my highest achievements ever, taking her in the summer holidays. So I sent her with Dad this time.
Oh, nice. He gets to contend a little bit for once.
Exactly.
And what does a typical day look like for you at the moment? You kind of quite busy with talks and a number of other things. What is it? What are you up to?
It's very variable. I work from. I mean, I'm self-employed. I'm always busy. I always have more on my plate than I can manage. It's an old drama of mine, but I run workshops. I give talks. I'm not writing at the moment because my second book just came out this summer, so I'm not ready to write another one. So I'm really actually focused on how to make more money at this point, because the last few years everything changed in my work life, which we can talk about. I used to run a successful business, and then I got diagnosed with cancer, and it's actually become very challenging financially. So right now I'm looking at how can I build a business again and do that within the limits of my health. So I never expected to be doing that, but I'm looking at I mean, I give talks and I write, but that's not very lucrative. So I'm looking at maybe I will consult in business again in some particular ways. So I'm reinventing some things right now.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds like a journey that both Craig and I are actually going through right now as well. So we know what you're talking about. That's for sure.
Yeah, the great income challenge.
Yeah, for sure. And is it more of a challenge because, say, like your medical bills are a bit more now? Is that one?
Well, my medical bills have been, enormous in some ways. And I'm fortunate to have some insurance. But there have been times when I've needed to raise money for medical treatment. And there are things like I can't get a mortgage because my cancer diagnosis is terminal. What? No one will give me a mortgage. So because I'm terminal, so I'm not a safe bet. So we can't buy a home, or all those kinds of things are much more challenging for us. So we've been renting somewhere for 6.5 years, and it's a lovely place. I mean, it served us well, but I don't like pouring money into rent month after month. Yeah. We're very mortgage based in the UK. Everyone likes to buy a house and own it. The whole cultural thing here. And I always did before I had this disease, and we happened to be renting when I was diagnosed, and that's the end of anyone lending me any money.
Goodness, there's so many facets to it.
There's a lot of facets. That are challenging, sure. And of course, sometimes I'm incredibly ill and I can't work at all. So it's tricky, but it's okay. I get creative with it, and I'm amazed by what I've actually done in the last 4 years.
Wow. I guess the necessity is the mother of invention, and I guess you're putting that to good work at the moment.
I am.
Yeah. Now, Sophie, you're a very strong-willed and confident woman, and there's obviously a journey that you've been on to get that way. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what your youth was like and where you grew up, and how life was like when you were a youngster.
Sure. I grew up partly in London and partly in Wales. My father was Welsh, and he was a politician. Well, he became a politician when I was 4 years old. So I grew up in a very political world. I would say I grew up in a privileged world in many ways, very white privileged. I think I made my first black friend when I was 16. That gives you a measure of the kind of privileged world I grew up in. And I grew up in a very political context that I struggled with in a lot of ways. I mean, I didn't really until I was a teenager when my dad actually became a cabinet minister, and he became quite a senior politician, and we used to leave our house and people would throw eggs at our windows, and we'd come home to dead bunnies on the lawn. And there was a lot of rage towards him for a couple of years that really, it shifted actually, because people came to see that he was actually a man of great integrity, which I'm very proud to say. I've just literally had his Thanksgiving service last week, and it was an amazing event, and many senior politicians came, and it was a very moving thing. But in my youth, I became very, very rebellious about it all, actually. And people, by the time I was at university, people used to say, "What does your dad do?" And I would lie. I would just lie. And he used to call me Peter because I denied him all the time. Before the cock crows. I mean, he was very good natured about it. But I think growing up in that background, I saw a lot of entitlement. I saw a lot of extreme wealth. I mean, that wasn't our situation. My parents weren't extremely wealthy. They were better off than many. And I grew up in that kind of world, and I actually, something inside me objected to it from a very young age. It seemed very unfair. It seemed wrong in some ways. And it began with a rebellion, just a teenage rebellion. But really, I wanted to, when I left school, I mean, I went to this girls' private school all my life. And when I left, I knew I needed to wake up. And I went and lived in New Orleans, Louisiana for a year before I went to university. I mean, on my own, didn't know anyone. And that city, if you want to wake up, go live in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And hang around in the French Quarter. And it was just an extraordinary awakening for me, to see what real people were like. Dare I say that? It's not that the people I grew up with weren't real. Some of them are really good friends of mine. But it was a very narrow world, and I wanted to break out of it. And I'm glad to say I did in many, many ways.
That's quite wise of you to kind of do that, most people would just get used to a sort of maybe cushy sort of life and just want to carry on.
Yeah, I think that's true. And a lot of my school friends did that. They got married in their early 20s and, and lived in gorgeous houses. But I loved work at school. I loved writing English essays. I won a public speaking competition. And I had a dad who taught me to use my brain and be a powerful woman and show up in the world. He was a public servant, a true public servant. And I'm very, very like him. I mean, he was still going to the House of Lords like 6 months before he died. He just was he was devoted. And I'm like him. I'm not alive if I'm not contributing. I need to be contributing, and I need to be engaged in the world and engaged in what's going on in the world. And he taught me a lot about that, actually. So even though I resented him and denied him as a teenager, he taught me a lot about, if you're born privileged, then be of service. Your job is to be of service and give back. So he very much raised me in that, with that mindset. And I'm very grateful that he did.
Yeah, sounds like a great man. And your dad was also, he was a Conservative MP, if I'm right.
Conservative MP, yeah.
And then you made him really proud by running for Labour candidacy at school, is that right?
I did. There was a mock general election the same year as a real general election, and my headmistress said, will you be the Conservative candidate? I said, no, I'll be the Labour candidate. Just the question annoyed me that she assumed that. So I did run as the Labour candidate in a very conservative school, and I did win it. And my dad was chuffed to bits about that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he was very proud, because he used to introduce me to Labour politicians and say, this is my daughter, she's one of yours. And I wasn't authentically one of theirs at that point. I was just being rebellious. I hadn't actually figured out what my politics were or what I believed in or what I stood for. But yeah, he was very gracious about that.
You just knew that it needed to be different to his, and that was enough for you to know.
Exactly. So that was the kind of context I grew up in.
And you mentioned the bunnies on the lawn, and there were a few other incidences that happened. For example, there was a bomb that was planted intended for your dad when you were really young. I think it was 13. How did that sort of affect you?
Well, when it actually happened, Mum and Dad were in London at a party, and I was in our home in Wales with my granny and my brother and my sister. And we'd had quite a few bomb threats by then already. My dad was Secretary of State for Wales, so these were Welsh nationalists. The actual night was kind of fun. I mean, I'd like to tell you it was traumatic. It wasn't. It was really funny. I didn't feel scared at all. My granny came into my bedroom and said, it's 2 a.m, there's a bomb in the house. Very calm. And I thought, oh yeah, no, of course there isn't. And sure enough, there were ambulances and bomb squads and everything on in the drive. And we all sat in the police car giggling. And my brother was fretting about his tickets to the Clash concert. And I remember a policeman trying to pick up the dog, and I thought it was my brother. It was dark, and I said, pick her up. And he did, and she bit him. So there were all these kind of funny things that night. So it wasn't traumatic for me in that sense. I think it was far harder for my dad when we phoned him and said they actually found the bomb in the house. It was a petrol bomb that had been put through onto a windowsill where my brother was sleeping, because we had the windows open. It was, I think it was summer and the windows were open. Someone just slipped a bomb through the window. But I think the way it really affected me was I came out of it wondering why people wanted to kill my dad. Until then, he was just dad. But actually, people want to kill him, and they want to kill Margaret Thatcher, who he worked for. And that made me very curious about why that was, and what people hated about what she was doing and what he was doing. And I think in many ways it woke me up politically, and I ended up doing politics A-level, and I wanted to wise up about what was going on. I wanted to educate myself about social issues and things I was incredibly naive about. And in fact, I mean, it calmed down after a couple of years, because Dad made so many wonderful changes in Wales that even the Welsh nationalists and the socialists said he's the best thing that's happened to Wales in a really long time. He made sure Welsh was taught in all Welsh schools. He fought for Welsh traditions, Welsh national opera. So they all backed off after a couple of years, actually, because they realized he wasn't using that office as a stepping stone to something greater. He stayed in that job for 8 years, and he's the longest serving Secretary of State for Wales that has ever been. So in a way, the heat turned down after a couple of years, but it was a very kind of chilling way to go, hang on a minute, what do I not know about the world? What do I not know about other people's lives? What's going on here that I need to know about? And in that sense, it was one of the best things that I think could have happened to me, because I probably would have continued to live a very cosseted, naive existence.
And maybe you can just sort of remind us what was going on at the time. From my understanding, I think that was when Maggie was sort of trying to take away a lot of the mining jobs and that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of mining in Wales. Is that right?
That's right. Now, I'm not gonna. I'm not an expert on this. So, but what was happening at the time is that the miners were striking. I think it was maybe a bit early. I can't remember the dates, but coal mining was a huge Welsh industry, and it was a war between the government and the miners for some time. I mean, it was a very, very dark time. My dad was kind of a part of all that and perceived to be part of the problem with all of that. But as I say, I think they began to realize that actually he would fight for Wales against Thatcher if he needed to, ultimately. And he stood up for Wales in ways that made a big difference. So in the end, he became a very popular minister. But it was, she did a lot of things people didn't like. And also one of the things I found, I mean, I grew up, I used to come home for dinner and there'd be a senior cabinet minister around for dinner, or Margaret Thatcher came and stayed in our house in Wales and walked up the mountain in her high heels with her bodyguard. I mean, she just had no clue about the countryside. And, I grew up around this. What I found was there was a lot of pomposity, a kind of arrogance and pomposity I didn't like. I mean, me and my brother beat that out of my dad. I mean, we were merciless with him if he was pompous. What I saw in her was a form of female power that I didn't want. So I thought, if being a powerful woman means being like her, I don't want that. And if she's our role model for powerful women, because in some ways she was more man than some men. She was quite hard, quite cold. I remember one journalist wrote something about her saying, she got through the glass ceiling for women and then pulled the ladder up after her. She did a lot of things that didn't empower women. So I found myself going, there has to be another way to be a powerful woman than that. And eventually I took this course in my early 20s called, it was then the Life Training, is now the More to Life Weekend. And this woman was leading this weekend. And Sue Oldham, she was called. And she just had this incredible backbone and this incredible heart. I'd never seen a woman lead like this woman led. It makes me cry just remembering her. And she, I remember, I don't think she said this, but she talked about, what I saw in her was power is, we've mislocated power in our brains, our brawn and our genitals, frankly, in this culture. And actually our power lies in having a strong backbone and a discerning mind and a very open heart. And that's where our real power lies as human beings. It doesn't lie in how much muscle we have, or how big our balls are, or even how big our brains are, actually. And she was a model for me. I went, oh, that's what it's like to be a powerful human being in the world, is to love and be bold at the same time. It was a revelation to me. So, wow. Yeah.
I actually had like goosebumps just when you said that. It just kind of struck something in me that just was like, yeah, you're so right. And as part of that course, from my understanding, you actually met a mentor of yours, Dr. Bradford Brown.
I did. You're very well researched. I'm very impressed. Yeah, I met Brad Brown. It took me a couple of years because he created this program in 1981. It started, well, he didn't create a program. He ran one course. And people who took the course went, this was extraordinary. Let's take it to London. Let's take it to South Africa. And it just virally grew through people taking it and taking it to where they lived. And he just followed that in some ways. I didn't meet him for a couple of years. I did some of his courses, but I was aware of him. And he was, I think he was an unsung genius of the 20th century. He was a direct student of people like Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning and survived Auschwitz. He was a direct student of Alan Watts, who brought British philosopher, who brought Eastern philosophy to the West. Carl Rogers, who was one of the founders of humanistic psychology, and some other. I mean, these were direct mentors of his. So he had some amazing, and he marched with Luther King, and he was a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, theologian. He was quite an extraordinary man. He would not like me saying that, actually. He said there are no extraordinary people, Sophie, just ordinary people who do extraordinary things with what they're given.
Nice.
And he had this humility. He didn't want to be an Anthony Robbins. He didn't want to be a guru. He didn't want to be a brand. He didn't want everything centered around Brad Brown. He wanted to build a kind of a body of leaders who could take his work forwards. He wanted it to be about the work rather than the personalities, actually. So he never wrote a book about what he did. And when we started out, we were very unique, very weird. Not many people were doing what we were doing. Est was around then, though we're not Est, I need to say. We're very different to Est. But there were a few things. And slowly the kind of personal growth, it's not a phrase I really like, but for now, personal growth market got flooded with stuff. And he became, in some ways, invisible in all of that. And I think when he got Parkinson's in the end, and Lewy body dementia, which is what Robin Williams was diagnosed with, that the combination of those two, a brutal thing to experience. And he regretted not writing a book about his work and not being willing to be more visible. And in fact, one of his core beliefs was, I'm invisible. I mean, he used to teach people about our core beliefs and how to change them. And one of his was, I'm invisible. And I said to him, Brad, you've really created that. I mean, you've really lived that one out, actually, and made yourself invisible. So I'm really happy to have written a book, I mean, that's largely about his work, Life Shocks, and about some of the work I've done myself and evolved since he died, and to kind of get his name out there really for the first time ever. But he was my mentor, personal mentor, for 15 years. We went into business together. I said, let's take your work into business. And he said, don't be ridiculous. And I said, no, really, let's take this into business. He went, they won't like this, Sophie. I said, no, we really can do this. And we eventually got a contract with British Airways, I think, and started doing mindset change in British Airways in the early 90s.
Wow.
And yeah, it was cool. But they didn't like Brad. He said to me at one point, why do they like you and not me, Sophie? And I said, firstly, you're a Californian psychologist, which means you're stuffed before you walk in the room. And we're British, we can't stand all that stuff. And I said, and secondly, you don't have a diplomatic bone in your body. You're just too truthful. You can't be that truthful. And we eventually agreed he couldn't interact with the clients because he just couldn't be diplomatic. He was just bold and people thought he was rude, and he just was incredibly truthful. And in fact, the church asked him he was a priest, and the church, he fell out with the bishop for telling too much truth. They didn't like how truthful he was when he ran his services. And he would interrupt the droning congregations and yell, "You're singing for the love of God, for God's sake." And his bishop would look on and go, "No, you can't do that." So he was a truth teller, whatever the impact. That man told the truth. So we had to protect our clients from him a bit. I said there are other ways we can do this, Brad, but I ran that business for 20 years until I was diagnosed, and we won awards and we did really well.
Wow, it's amazing. I mean, actually, I wanted to just ask about you mentioned South Africa, and you were a key player in this business and what have you, and you actually worked for the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, I might be wrong on this, but you stayed on Robben Island for some time, for a little while, and maybe you could just tell us what your experience was like in South Africa.
Sure. Well, the More to Life program was quite big in South Africa. There are some communities there, and we had a client. I mean, the Mandela Rhodes client. There was a connection there somehow, but my business interaction is separate from More to Life. That's an educational charity. We were running a profitable business, but the Mandela Rhodes Foundation. I mean, get the name for starters, Mandela Rhodes. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, get that. That he put his name to the Rhodes Foundation. I mean, that's what he was about. Forgiveness and partnership and reconciliation. So it's just an extraordinary thing in itself. And of course, being British, I was Rhodes, in that context. I needed to deal with the rage and resentment about Rhodes and who he was and what he did. But the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, its mission is to create the future leaders of Africa. And it works with scholars from universities in South Africa, also Botswana, several countries, and brings them together. And we ran a leadership course for these young South African scholars. And the venue, it was a 5-6 day course. The venue was Robben Island. Now, most people get to visit Robben Island and leave. We got to stay there for a whole week. We slept in the cells. We had beds in the cells.
Wow.
It was freezing. It was winter. It was freezing. Just the cold. How did they do this? And I got to spend a week with these young, incredibly talented young Africans, really helping them let go of their own resentment about their history, developing leadership mindsets that would carry them forwards through their leadership in years and decades to come. It was an incredible privilege. We did need to get through. We're being trained by a white woman from Britain. That was an issue, but we of course it was an issue, but we worked with it, and when here it is, so let's deal with this. This is it. Here we are again. And now actually, but the woman who hired me was this wonderful African woman who had, been injured during apartheid, and incredible woman called Rejoice. I mean, Rejoice. So we ran this course there, and the thing I remember most was we were taken round the cells where Mandela and the other leaders were imprisoned. And we weren't sleeping there. They were very much, sacred places in some way. You could visit them, but not hang out there. And one of the prisoners who'd been with Mandela showed us and all the students around. And I think the big mistake that was made, from the white South African, Afrikaners' point of view, is they put all the leaders together in the same building. So they were all the imprisoned leaders were together for all those years. And I remember he walked us into Mandela's cell, 2 people at a time, because it literally was 6 by 6. And one of the students said to him, "How did you survive in such a small space?" God. And he looked at this student and he said, the space wasn't small, it was vast. We were in Africa.
Huh. Wow.
I mean, like that. It wasn't small, it was vast. We were in Africa. I'll never forget it. I mean, there were just tears pouring down my face. And we went back to the training room and I went, that's what I mean by attitude that can transform the world. You can live in, and that's how they made it. Right there is how they made it. So yeah, that was an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, well, we got a nice picture of the man just here behind me. So
I see that. How appropriate
for me is. I don't know. There's like
he's the man, isn't he?
He totally is.
He's totally the man.
I mean, I think I've been to Robben Island like 3 times now. Just every time I'm kind of blown away by the whole story, and also saddened by what happened. It's a tragic time, and how Mandela learned to forgive. Only he will know, but it was truly amazing.
Well, I think he said when he walked out, I knew that if I brought my anger with me, I would still not be free when he left. And actually, some of the work we do in the More to Life program, and there's a chapter in my new book about forgiveness, is we work a lot with forgiveness, because it's one of those things that people say how important it is to forgive, but actually, how can I swear?
Yeah.
How the fuck do you actually do that? It's a very hard thing to do, and we confuse forgiveness with condoning. So we think to forgive is to condone what happened. So if I forgive you, then I'm saying what you did was okay. And that in itself means we don't forgive. And then there are also just profound payoffs to, I mean, our definition of resentment is ill will held over time towards someone or something for good reasons. And forgiveness is the release of ill will. It's the refusal to hold ill will anymore. But there are so many payoffs to resentment. I mean, look at what's going on in the world right now. I mean, in my humble opinion, Donald Trump was elected on a platform of resentment.
Yeah, for sure.
Pure
100%.
Pure and simple. And, when you resent, you feel powerful, you feel superior. They're all illusions, but superior, you get to be right, you get to be the victim, you get to be the martyr. I mean, the payoffs are so juicy. You get, a massive fix of kind of pseudo self-esteem. I call it the power of the powerless. It's like when you believe you're powerless, which most of these people who elected Trump believe they're powerless. They don't consciously know that, but they believe they've been completely disempowered and are powerless. So how do you steal power back? Through resentment, which makes you better than other people. It puts you above, and then you can justify dehumanizing anybody from that position. You can dehumanize anyone. So we need to learn when you get that the cost outweighs the payoff, when you feel how the cost to your well-being, to your spirit, to your creativity, to your self-expression, to your self-regard, to your integrity, and you feel the pain of that, you'll drop resentment like a hot potato or a hot stone. But as long as unless you see that the costs outweigh the benefits, it's very hard to actually let the ill will go. And it's very missing in our educational culture that how do you actually forgive people? And Mandela did it. But even he, I mean, I think, and Desmond Tutu, I mean, the work they've done is just extraordinary. But there's still so much resentment in South Africa. I mean, I've traveled there last year, and in many ways, it still has a stranglehold on South African culture.
Yeah, it does for sure. I mean, it like you said, it's probably holding us back from actually moving forward. But it also, Wow, it's very, very, very difficult for people like myself, Craig, yourself, to understand what the Black people in South Africa went through. So you can understand that
Exactly.
resentment in a way. It's just they're not gonna forgive overnight. That's for sure. Yeah. So
That's for sure. And unless we're given the skills to do that, it's a very difficult thing to do. Similarly, the white people in America, the white collar people who resent immigrants, it's just flipped the other way. It's the most destructive force on the planet, resentment, and it runs the world in many, many ways. And yeah, I feel passionate about that, as you can tell. But I'll stop now.
No, for sure. I mean, that was
talking about resentment.
That was so eloquently put, and I think so many people could learn by literally those like 3 minutes that you just spoke there now.
Yeah.
Just shifting gear slightly differently.
Sure.
I think it was like 42 years old, you fell pregnant. Is that right? Through IVF, which was a bit of a surprise for you.
It was a surprise. Yeah, I met my beloved husband late in life. I nearly got married twice, once in my 20s, once in my 30s, for the wrong reasons. But I kept it. I didn't, I'm glad to say. And I met my darling John. I mean, I think I was 39, and we got married 7 months later.
Wow.
He's my person. I'm his person, and he was worth the wait. And he had a grown-up son. I mean, his son was 18, I think, at that point. He thought it was all over, and he was home free. Parenting was all behind him, and I said, I want to have a kid. I said, it's not a condition. If you don't want to do it, I'll still marry you. It's definitely not a condition. But he kind of went, okay, let's do that. And we were given a 5% chance. By the time we were doing it, I was given a 5% chance of getting pregnant, even with IVF. And we did 3 rounds of IVF. I was earning pretty good money then, so we were privileged enough to be able to do that. And the 3rd round we agreed was the final one, and 2 pink lines. It was fantastic. She's now 8.5.
Fantastic news.
What a blessing, yeah.
Yeah. And so we know exactly why we're here. I guess why we want to talk to you about something. And most people we know in our lives, and most people know people that have suffered with cancer or have obviously cancer. So it's a huge thing that's impacting everyone in day-to-day life these days.
Yeah.
What was it like for you when you found out that you had incurable lung cancer?
Well, I mean, it was devastating at the time. I was blindsided because partly I was so happy. I'd found the love of my life. This miracle child had arrived. I was doing what I loved. I was very, very happy. And I'm very clear that I played a part in my disease. You know, we can talk about that. I did not, I was quite self-harming, I think is the word. In my youth, in my teens, in my 20s, I did damage to my body, definitely. I don't think that's the only cause. I think there are multiple factors that lead to it. But as you say, I mean, 1 in 3 people are being diagnosed now. But it was very blindsiding in that I didn't feel ill. I had a sharp pain in my back for 1 hour, and my sixth sense, just all my red lights, all my intuitive red lights started flashing like this, just flashing. And I went to see the doctor. I said, I need an x-ray. He said, no, you don't. You probably got a virus. Let's put you on antibiotics. I said, well, can you test me for a virus? He said, okay. There was no virus. Still, he wanted to put me on antibiotics. It was because I seemed well. Just getting an x-ray with the NHS in England was a battle. Just getting an x-ray was a battle. In fact, you know, here I am. This is my privilege again playing out. I had a private doctor when I was younger. I mean, mainly I use the NHS, but I called him. I hadn't spoken to him for 15 years. And I said, can you get me x-ray? he said, I need to see you. I said, I haven't got time. Can you get me x-rayed? And he said, okay, I will. And he booked me in for an x-ray in London. And sure enough, one x-ray and the whole medical machine just started to roll very, very, very fast, because there was a mass in my lung. And I then had scan after scan after scan. I was riddled with tumors. I had tumors in my lymph nodes. I had tumors in my bones. I had them on my spine. And by now, it's really interesting. By now, I'm gravely ill. So now I'm vomiting blood. I can't breathe walking up the stairs. I have pain ricocheting down my spine because the tumor's eating through the vertebra to my spinal column. I'm dying. I start dying, and actually, I'm convinced of this. When they told me I was going to die, I started dying. That's a whole interesting thing. It was in my head, and I started dying the moment I was told I was going to die. It happened within 24 hours, I think.
Right.
But my darkest hour was, I went to plan my radiotherapy sessions, and so that was the purpose of the meeting. My husband wasn't with me that day, and I'd had my brain scanned, and so I was on my own. It was winter, and I sat down with my oncologist, and he said, Sophie, I need to tell you, you have multiple tumors in your brain. And I said, how many? And he said, more than we could count. And that was that was the moment that, or the life shock, as I call it, you have more than we can count, that brought me to my knees. I mean, my knees. And I have since learned that when we're brought to our knees is when we can rise to our destiny, actually. Because I think in many ways I've risen to my destiny since that moment. But it was a very, very dark time, and I have the skills to work with my terror and my fear. My grief was much greater than my fear. My fear was huge. I didn't sleep for, I didn't sleep for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. I literally didn't sleep. But I was overcome by grief, actually, just deep, deep grief and regret about all the things I hadn't done that I wished I'd done, all the things I had done that I wished I hadn't done, and the future I wasn't going to have. I wasn't going to get to raise my daughter. It was just, I was grief-stricken. And I later learned that in Chinese medicine, grief is held in the lungs. And interesting. And for all the work I'd done on myself, on my anger and my fear and my resentments and my being, I'd done a lot of work on myself over many years of therapy and personal growth and spiritual work. I'd never really engaged with grief in any real way. I'd reserved it for the great deaths and shattering losses of our lives, but not for those daily disappointments that actually scatter our days. And it completely transformed my relationship with grief. And I think that was one of the things that I still have cancer, to be clear. So, but it was one of the things that healed me in some way. In fact, there was deep healing for me. The first, my book, The Cancer Whisperer, the original subtitle was How to Let Cancer Heal Your Life. And actually my US publisher changed it. There was a whole drama I don't need to go into, and we changed the subtitle, but I really meant it, that cancer started to heal my life. It revealed to me the healing I hadn't done that needed doing. So it was devastating. And at the same time, I had the tools in my hands to engage with my terror and my grief. And I realized that all around me, I mean, we were so British about it, and we'd sit in these waiting rooms and no one was talking to each other. We were all waiting for treatment. No one's saying, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you as scared as me? Are you as freaked out as me? It was just eyes down, stiff upper lips, no one connecting. I was like, oh my God. And one of the life shocks for me that I wrote about was I was sitting in a waiting room and tears were pouring down my face. I think someone sent me a beautiful text that made me cry, which I was fine with. You know, I'm fine crying. I'm very happy to be crying. Thank you very much. And this Macmillan nurse came running up to me saying, like, she was so anxious that I was crying. She just dumped all her anxiousness on my lap. Like, are you okay? You're okay. You're okay. The subtext was, stop crying, stop crying. You know, it was like really not okay to be crying in this environment. And she said, are you okay? And I said, you know what? I think I'm the only one person here who is. I think it's extremely emotionally congruent. I've just been told I have 4 months to live. I've just been given 4 months to live. And you're wondering why I'm crying. Wow. Why is no one else crying? Why am I the only person crying? Goodness. And that's what really inspired me to write The Cancer Whisperer, to help cancer patients navigate the psychological and emotional challenges. Because if we don't take hold of our fear just takes hold of us and it runs the show. It makes our decisions for us. It obeys our doctors, who don't always know what they're doing. I'm very clear about that. And if we're going to, especially if you're stage 4, if you're going to have any chance of at least a quality of life, let alone an extension of your life, you need to take charge as much as you can and take the reins. So that's really why I wrote the book. And I mean, the other turning point for me, it was a nurse came running up to me in the hospital and said, here's your radiotherapy appointment for my neck. And I looked at it. I did not know how controversial this was. I took some heat for this afterwards, but I looked at it and I looked at my diary and I said, I'm not available that day. And she said, what? And I said, I'm not available that day. I have something else. Can you change the appointment for me? This was apparently a completely taboo thing to do in the NHS. Okay. I said, can you change it for me? I'm not free. I mean, it was really outrageous. But for me, there was this moment internally, and I thought, could I change what I'm doing? Yes, I could change what I'm doing that day. But it was a moment of, I have a choice here. I either fit my life into cancer or I fit cancer into my life. And if I fit my life into cancer, I'm going to be dead very, very fast. So it was a very powerful psychological stand to say, I will not fit my life into cancer. I'm not going to do that. And she gave me another appointment. But I think that was the moment I took I took my power back from the system and said, no, I'm going to make the decisions, and that's how it's going to be now. And that's how it's been since. So, and that's what I spend a lot of my time helping other cancer patients to do, is to get through the terror and put themselves in the driving seats again. And it's one of the privileges of my life. I mean, you don't plan that, do you? I mean, who plans doing that with your life? But it seems to be what I'm doing.
Wow. Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, that is a massive help to a lot of people. You were just mentioning earlier the use of language and how impactful that can be in a positive and a negative way. And you also mentioned some turning points. As far as I understand, there was another sort of a powerful moment with one of your doctors that he had some sort of positive words for you, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about those.
Oh, I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
About taking the power back in your life.
Oh, him. Yes, thanks. Yeah. Gosh, you've really my story better than I do. It's amazing. Yes, my diagnostician, Dr. Shah. Oh, he was awesome. He, I was a deer in headlights at this point in time. I didn't know the full extent of my disease at this point. But I was leaving his office And he said to me, he took both my hands in his and he said, "Don't become a patient, Mrs. Sabbage. Live your life." Don't become a patient. That's what he said to me. Can you imagine a doctor saying that to you? It was really one of the most empowering things anyone ever said to me in my life.
Wow.
Isn't it amazing how literally a few words can just sort of impact you and change your life? Like literally, that's what it is. It's just awesome.
It went right into my chest, and it took me several weeks to really get hold of it. I mean, I think it was when I said no to that appointment that the power of those words came to life in me and went, oh, this is what it looks like to not be a patient, to not let the system take over my life, but to be myself. You know, I'm not advocating everyone says no to every appointment. Of course, I say yes to most of them. But yeah, I think that when I said no to that appointment was when that became very real for me. Like, oh, I'm not going to be a patient. I'm going to stay Sophie, even though by then my eyesight was going and I was losing my ability to speak coherent sentences. And I was in deep shit Arkansas at that point. But
wow,
here I still am.
Yeah, mindset is huge. Hey, so you're talking about now in those dark months. I think you were looking for ways to find cures and researching them, and you also started planning your own funeral. What's it like contemplating your own death?
Well, it's no Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
Definitely not a Mardi Gras situation. I've done it twice, actually, because I've nearly died twice. So I nearly died in those early months, and then I nearly died again in the summer of 2017. So I've had two close encounters. I've had multiple brain tumors 3 times now. So the biggest challenge for me is treatments. It's very hard to get treatments into your brain because of the blood-brain barrier. So it's a very vulnerable place for me. So the first time I needed to plan my funeral because I was very evidently dying in those early weeks. I just was coughing all day and I was in incredible pain. And my daughter was 4.5, and I needed to sit down with her as best I could and say, Mummy might die. I might not be here for your 5th birthday, and I love you with my life. And God, it was hard. And, you know, it's harder for her now because she understands more. But my husband, he lost his dad when he was 6 years old. He died of multiple sclerosis, and nobody told him what was going on. And his father just disappeared. And he wasn't taken to the funeral. He didn't get to say goodbye. He was kept in the dark for the whole thing. And I think that was far more traumatic for him than actually losing his father, because what happens with kids is if you don't tell them what's going on, they think they've done something wrong. So there's a lot of research about this. So I'm not answering your question yet, but I think it's important that they think I've done something wrong. And so John and I were very, very clear we were going to tell Gabriella the truth, include her in what was happening, so that she wasn't left wondering and picking things up. And she was amazing, actually, at that time. So that was one of the hardest things I had to do. And then, I needed to plan my funeral. I mean, in a way, that was quite a straightforward thing to do. But it was more about preparing for my death and preparing my family to live without me. That was really... And I set up I've got it here. I've got my camera light on right now, and I set up this little studio and started to make films for Gabriella about menstruation and boys and things that her dad might not be able to help her with.
Oh.
And I plan to leave her a little library of little videos of her mum helping her as best I can with some of the things she might need her mummy for. How to shave your legs. Not that she might want to do that, but I mean, really, these things started coming into my head going, well, how's she gonna, know how to do that? So that was, and I was glad to stop. I mean, when I started to feel well again, I went, right, I'm not coming back to that until I'm dying again. It was a really hard thing to do. And then again, last summer, I had my third round of brain tumors, and I had a very large tumor on the balance part of my brain. So I would spin out a lot. The whole world would spin, and if I turned my head from side to side, I would fall over or throw up, or it was really debilitating. And I spent most of that summer in bed, actually, getting worse and worse and worse, because my doctors keep saying, you need to have whole brain radiation, because that's the standard treatment when you have brain tumors. But whole brain radiation devastates the brain in many ways. 2 years later, you start getting dementia, or could do. I'm quite fond of my brain. I'm very fond of my brain, and I've done everything I can to avoid having my whole brain fried. So even though I was really declining, I was still resisting whole brain radiation to see if there was another way, and there was. I'm really happy to say it took me 9 months to find it. But when I wrote my second book most of that summer, the one thing I could do was sit in bed and write. So I wrote most of my second book as long as I kept my head still during that time. But there was one night when, again, this time I planned my memorial service as well as my funeral. I said, let's have a Thanksgiving service. I don't want anyone wearing black, everyone in bright colors. And I kind of had fun doing that. It was kind of fun to plan it and go. And it really helped me accept my mortality again, because we're all terminal, guys. I'm not unique. We're all terminal. So I'm not so special. You can be taken out any time by anything. You could be run down by a bus or struck by lightning, or we're all terminal. So let's get it that we're all terminal, and what are we all going to do with that? How are we going to be with that? How are we going to live our lives knowing? And in a way, cancer patients are privileged because we've been put on notice. And our mortality is right in our faces, and we get to respond to that. And it's been the most creative, life-drenched, productive few years of my life. By a long shot, it's been like a homeopathic dose of pure vitality and purposefulness, and being who I want to be, and doing what I want to do. And it's been an incredibly profound, I would give cancer back tomorrow, of course, because I want to raise my daughter, but I would not give back what it's taught me at all. So in that sense, we're all terminal, and we would all do well to just wake up to that reality. But there was one night that I really thought I was going to die. I felt myself slipping into a very dark chasm in my consciousness, and I thought, I don't think I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. I think this is it. Sorry, it's pinging again. So I remember that night. There's something I do. I teach people about mind talk, that voice in our heads. Some people call it self-talk or the critical voice. I call it mind talk. And I normally have, hang on. Not that your listeners will see this, but it might amuse you. When I teach people about mind talk, I use this guy.
I've seen you talk with that.
I'm holding up a snake.
Yeah.
But, this voice that tells us stuff like, you're going to die, or you're a loser, you're a scumbag, you're a failure, whatever it's saying. So it was speaking to me, and I teach people, whatever we're telling ourselves is true, false, or don't know, you can challenge and verify everything you're believing. everything we believe is true, false, or don't know. And I remember lying there that night thinking I'm going to die. And I said, actually, I don't know. That's a don't know. I don't know. But what if I do? What if I am? And I remember saying, okay, I choose to die tonight. If that's what is going to happen, then I choose to die tonight. And I think my last words before I fell asleep were, thy will be done. It was an incredible, incredible moment of surrender for me. I think I learned surrender that night, like true surrender. And what I learned about surrender is that it gives you your power back, actually, because even death we can choose. It was a very, I think since that moment, I feel more at peace with my mortality than I've ever felt. I'm okay about, I feel okay about dying. I don't feel okay about leaving my daughter. I'm not at peace with that. And I frankly don't want to find peace with that, because she's my inspiration for carrying on. So that's the thing that's hardest for me to bear, is the idea that she's going to lose me probably before maybe in the next year or so. It's hard to tell.
Wow. And Sophie, I mean, there's just stuff that it's just really hard to kind of fathom and really, really heart-wrenching. But how did you feel that morning when you woke up?
Oh, good question. I felt very relieved. I felt very grateful. And I had this sense of, I'm going to find a way back from this, which I hadn't had before. Like, I had this very strong sense of, I'm not done yet. And I wasn't, I did find a way back. And I've actually had over a year of incredible wellness. I feel really well right now. But there was a sense of, I'm not done yet. And I think that was helpful to me too, because I thought at the end of the day, I can do everything I can to stay alive, and I will do everything I can to stay alive, of course, within reason, because I want a quality of life. And if I lose that, if I start losing Sophie to brain tumors, then I will choose to go rather than stay. I think that's, I talk to cancer patients about, we can choose to go as well as stay, and we can win even when we lose. There's many ways we can win even if we ultimately lose. So I feel very strongly about that. But I now have this sense of, life with a capital L, reality, God, whatever you want to call something greater than us. It is going to take me when it's going to take me. It's not really I don't really think it's my choice. I don't think I'm in control of that. And that's very relieving, to not be in control of that, and to be in a state to surrender to that and go, okay, life will take me, death will take me, God will take me when it takes me. And meantime, what am I going to do with my days?
Sophie, I'm just wondering, have you ever come across a book called Tuesdays with Maurey by Mitch Albom?
I have. I read it years and years ago. It's a beautiful book.
Really beautiful book.
I mean, I might read it again now you've mentioned it. Beautiful book. It's
just how you're speaking now about telling your story, I guess, talking about, dying, actually, talking about your daughter. The story is kind of, it resonates with me, and it was for me, it reminds you, like, of the importance of even just talking about dying, but also, just about so many things. It's a great book.
Well, we've done dying a great disservice in Western culture. We've anesthetized death, really, and we have created a culture of extending life at any cost. And I think that's a very unhealthy and tragic thing to do, actually. I mean, my dad died in March and afraid of dying, and it was heartbreaking to see his fear of dying. And I worked with him a bit on it, and in fact he died very peacefully, but it was important to kind of help him get his yes to death, and not to fight his dying, to say, Dad, it's okay to go, and you've lived an incredible. So yeah, I mean, I watched and helped my dad die. I was with him in his last hours, and he eventually found his yes to it. He turned into it rather than away. But we need to do more to help people die, and we're not good at that.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're very good at just trying to prolong the length of life, but not one's actual health span, but rather just the lifespan.
Yeah.
And what's, what is it? What are you left with for many years of your life? And then you never actually come to terms with dying. It's so true. But you were talking about, the idea of dying and fighting and this. And one thing that we hear is the war on cancer and the battle with cancer and that kind of thing. And this is not really language that you like to use. And maybe you could just explain that a little bit, because it's used so prolifically.
Yeah, it really is. Now, let me be clear. We need to throw everything at cancer that we can throw at it. It's a brutal, brutal disease. However, the war on cancer, that metaphor was originally used by Richard Nixon. He declared the war on cancer for political capital. That was, and look how all that turned out for him, right? So it didn't work out well. And that metaphor stuck, though. So we're in a battle with cancer. The war on cancer, it pervades the whole culture. We're not in a battle we're not in the war on Alzheimer's or the war on flu, or it's a very particular metaphor for cancer. And part of what happens is, firstly, let me speak psychologically. When you're in a battle mindset, psychologically, that creates stress. It's a stressful mindset to be at war. I mean, it literally, to be at war with my own body at some level creates a stressful mindset. So it's just not helpful, because it adds stress to your body when you need to be calming your body, soothing your body. It's just not a helpful mindset. And then what we do is we talk about so-and-so lost their brave battle with cancer. David Bowie lost his brave battle with cancer. Victoria Wood lost her brave battle. It's reported, and we had a lot of celebrities dying. Alan Rickman lost his brave battle with cancer. This is how it's reported. Over and over and over again. Drives me bonkers. I mean, bonkers. Because, first of all, it makes the people who die losers and the people who survive winners. Which makes the people who are dying just think they're failures. It sets up this mindset that somehow, if I don't cure my disease, I'm now a failure and a loser as well. I mean, really, it's just really not helpful. And actually, it does a profound disservice, I believe, to the thousands, hundreds and thousands of emotional, psychological, spiritual victories that cancer patients accomplish while they're alive. Be that, getting up from vomiting on the bathroom floor and making dinner for their kids, but sitting in wonder at a sunset while the rest of the world rushes by, or finding their voice. I mean, I worked with a woman who had esophageal cancer. She had cancer in her throat. And she was actually dying when I spent some time with her. And she said to me, I remember she had a tumor. I could see her liver because she was so skinny. And she had a massive tumor on her liver. And I said, do you know the liver holds anger? And she said, yes, I do. Isn't that fascinating? She said, Sophie, I think I've been angry all my life, but I didn't know it till now. And I said, I didn't know it till now. And I said, well, what did you do with all that anger? Because she kept going, why did I get throat cancer? Why did I get breast cancer? I'm even pissed off about that. I mean, she was a fantastic woman. Pissed off about that. And why did I get throat cancer? And I said, well, what did you do with all that anger? And she looked at me, you know, there was this like light of recognition in her eyes. And she went, I swallowed it.
Wow.
I swallowed it all. And we just sat there going,
Wow.
So you got throat cancer, hey? And it was this revelation to her. I mean, it was possibly the most healing insight she'd ever had in her life. She got it before. It was a victory. It was like this massive victory. She went, oh, wow. I've swallowed my anger all my life. I get it. It was just incredible privilege to sit with her. I mean, these are the victories that I witness and do my best to help cancer patients find, but they all get discounted with, she lost her brave battle. And I want it to stop. And I call the book The Cancer Whisperer in the hope of finding another metaphor. It doesn't need to be that one, but, you know, horse whispering is about creating a relationship with the horse whereby you get into a dialogue with the horse and you learn the horse's language. And you don't break it, you join with it. It's called joining, horse whispering. So I thought, what if we join with cancer? What if we ask questions of it, like, what have you done with all your anger? I think there are strong psychological and emotional roots to every disease. But the most simple thing is cancer is not an enemy, it's an illness. It's not an enemy, it's an illness. And like all illnesses, in my humble opinion, it's pointing to what is out of kilter in our mind, heart, body, and spirit. And that's what we need to have our attention on instead of going to war.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Oh, you talk, and each time I'm just getting like goosebumps, like listening to you speak. You're very, very wise and inspirational indeed. So, speaking about books, your latest book, I think it is Life Shocks and How to Love Them. It's a book of it is a book about all the unwanted and unexpected moments in our lives. How did that come about? And it sounds like it also is influenced by your mentor as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the work I've been teaching for over 20 years and that Brad created in 1981. So in the More to Life program, and also in business, I mean, we work with business leaders on what life shocks they were getting in their business. That was what we did. You know, a life shock is an unexpected or unwanted moment. It's different to a life challenge. So a life challenge is living with cancer. And within our life challenges, we get many, many life shocks. So another life challenge is getting divorced, or a bereavement, or sexual assault, or we have many, many life challenges. But within those challenges, there are these very particular moments in time that are somehow very personal. So if you and I are in the same situation, if we were in a hurricane, or we were in a difficult, challenging situation, my life shocks would be different to yours, because the moments that strike me are the moments that will challenge my fear, my conditioning, my belief systems, my behavioral patterns. And the moments that strike you will be the ones that collide with your belief system. So a life shock really is a collision point between how I perceive the world and how the world really comes to me. their reality. Life shocks are little doses of reality showing up, going, no, it's not what you think. It's not what you believe. It's not how you think it should be. There's life as we expect it to be, and there's life as it really is. And life shocks show us life as it really is. So life shocks for me with cancer were moments like, Mrs. Sabbage, your cancer is incurable. It was a life shock to hear, don't become a patient. That was a life shock I really liked. You don't always, sometimes you really like them. 2 pink lines on my pregnancy test was a life shock I loved. I didn't expect that. I loved it. It was life going, no, it's not what you think. Wake up. It's something else is going to happen here. Or you have multiple brain tumors, Mr. Sabbage, or the only solution now is whole brain radiation. These are the moments that strike us, and they're very personal. So for me to have life shocks about my brain, I'm very attached to my brain, and it really revealed to me how much I have believed that my worth and my value depend upon my intelligence, my ability to my eloquence, my intelligence, and my ability to be of service in the world. So I'm valuable if I do those 3 things, then I'm a worthwhile human being. That was my mindset. Well, what would life give me to shake that up to its roots? Brain tumors that challenge my eloquence, my intelligence, my cognitive capabilities, and possibly my ability to contribute anything to anyone anymore. And so I got the opportunity to go, well, maybe I'm worthwhile even if I'm not being and doing those things. You know, maybe I still have value even if I'm not eloquent, even if I'm not clever. And that's what I mean by life shocks. You know, they can be brutal, but they challenge and expose how you see yourself and how you see the world. And I've been, you know, what we do in the program is we teach people how to bring their creative best to their life shocks and how to leverage them for the transformation that they offer. That's really the heart of the work that I do, and that's what that book is about. It's hard to explain without experiencing it, so I hope that was vaguely clear.
100%.
Okay.
It's really powerful just to also be aware that they're happening to us all the time and in different ways. Yeah, and it's not just those really, really, really big events. It's also little shocking things that happen in your day that was what intrigues me about this idea of the life shock. It's if you then once again you can really leverage those moments to it breaks your illusion of what's happening in that moment, and you can then almost be mindful of like, okay, what can I now
you really have got it. You really got it. I love how you're saying that. It is exactly that. We get dozens a day. And
makes a lot of sense. And you also say that parenting is life shock central. What does that mean?
Well, okay. Are either of you guys parents?
No, not yet.
Okay. So what I mean by that, I mean, cancer is life shock central. It's kind of just a cheesy thing to say, really.
Yeah.
It is a bit cheesy, but what I mean by that is children deliver life shocks. It's relentless. I mean, it's just this relentless barrage of life shocks. Some of them are just utterly heart-opening and heart-cracking and evoking and, oh, wow. I mean, you know, sometimes my daughter comes out with things. She was being really rude yesterday. She's going through a really defiant, rude phase. And I snapped at her yesterday. I said, "You're so rude," which is, you know, you wouldn't know. I teach what I teach sometimes. When it comes to parents, it's like, I know nothing anymore. I'm so rude. She said, "Mummy, it's not me who's rude, it's my behavior." Because I taught her the difference between who you are and how you behave. She is not, I am not rude, mummy. My behavior is rude. And I went, whoa. Just whoa. Teacher, teacher, learn from your child.
Yeah.
But there are times that I find it's second to cancer. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, being a mother. Huh. I get a lot of life shocks from her every day. I happen to have, I don't want to break her confidence here, but I have a very turbocharged child. I don't want to label, but she's full on. I mean, full on. She's never sat through a meal, for example. She's on the go all the time. So it really confronts for me any notion I have that I'm in control of anything. It calls on my compassion and my patience on a daily basis. I mean, I love this girl with my whole life. I used, before I had cancer, I used to say I would die for her. And now I say I would live for her, and I would live for her. I mean, that's my kind of one of my mantras. I will live for this girl. But I think parenting is a very challenging thing. Just at school, the life shocks at school, seeing what her friends can do that she can't do. She struggles with reading, for example. I was reading books at 3. And I need to release my expectations that my daughter will love books. Yeah. She doesn't at all. Could not be less interested in reading anything. So it's like that. But I think parents have this belief it's not okay to say I'm finding it hard. I mean, I watch the parenting around me. I need to be careful here. But there's this presentation of having it handled, of all being happy, of posting our happy family pictures on Facebook. And there's this kind of rose-colored illusion about parenting that I think we need to break. Because when you get behind closed doors, it's not that. It's parents struggle. And we need to just be talking about that. I'm amazed I didn't put a chapter in my book about parenting. Perhaps it's my next book, but I don't feel qualified yet to teach parenting or write about parenting or coach parenting, because I don't think anyone has the right to do that until they've successfully raised at least one child into adulthood. But I see parents with one kid age 6 becoming parenting coaches, and I'm really... I mean, really, it's just one of those areas of life I think is extremely difficult, and not enough of us are admitting that, actually.
But I also think we could extrapolate that idea of the rose-colored glasses on everyone and everyone's lives, that we're not allowed to say we're not handling it. I'm sure we could... That kind of, translates into everyone's lives to some degree sometimes,
and so the social media drama of, I have a commitment to be authentic on social media. And when I have dark days, I post about my dark days. And I just, the suicide rate for men in particular is getting higher and higher and higher because men are not given permission to say I'm in pain. I'm suffering, I'm struggling, and it's just tragic, really.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Like, I guess I know what they are, but just on radical honesty, like it's so difficult, I guess, in this day and age. It seems like it is, just to be so honest about, whatever's going on. What are your thoughts on it? There's obviously, I guess, some strategies in terms of how to do it.
I teach people. It's one of those things we say, be honest, tell the truth. Yes, but how? Actually, how do you do that? It's like, forgive people. But how? Tell me how, please. So I think there's a difference, firstly, between honesty and truthfulness. So I can be honest with you about what a crap day I'm having. I can be honest with you about how pissed off I am with my husband, which I'm not right now, but I have my days. I can be honest with you about what an asshole he is. Now, here I'm saying that. He's not an asshole, but I can be honest. I can be honest about me. I can rant to you about my husband.
Yes.
That doesn't mean I'm telling the truth. I can be honest without telling the truth. And I think we indulge in honesty sometimes, but we're not. There's a big difference between being honest about what I feel, which usually means feelings and beliefs are very confused, by the way. You know, being honest about what I feel and what I believe doesn't mean I'm in alignment with truth. I think there's a difference. And that we indulge in honesty sometimes at other people's expense. We say very hurtful things and then go, I'm just being honest. You know, we can be judgmental and unkind and harsh and go, I'm just being honest about what I think. Well, what I think is unkind and judgmental and harsh. What I think is not true. If that's what's coming out of my mouth, you know, I'm going to call you a loser, or I just think you're an idiot. I'm being honest that I think you're an idiot, but that doesn't make you an idiot. It makes me, you know, I'm being judgmental about you. So I think we need to be very discerning about what's honest and what's truth. That's the first thing. And then we need to learn what truth telling is. So all these beliefs that many of us have, I'm worthless, I'm useless, I'm unlovable, I'm a loser, I'm a scumbag, he's a loser, she's a scumbag. I mean, whatever it is, these judgments that we bandy around, or we have beliefs about the future, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. We don't know the future ever. So we need to learn to challenge what we believe. Is it true? Is it false? Is it, I don't know. And everything we believe is true, false, I don't know. And that's a skill to learn, because when we believe, let's say I believe I'm unworthy, which, you know, no, let me choose a real one of mine. This was a very strong belief for me for a long time. I'm too much. I believe I'm too much. I'm too emotional. I'm too intelligent. I'm too fat. I'm too expressed. I'm too whatever. But essentially, I went through my life believing that I was too much, and I had to rein myself in and hide my light under bushels and not shine too brightly. I had boyfriends who wanted to pull me down, to be level with me. They didn't want me to be brilliant or awesome or to shine too brightly. So I used to go, I'm too much, I'm too much, I'm too much. Well, when you believe something like that, it feels true. It feels true. I might intellectually look at it and go, well, maybe I'm not too much, but it feels true because I have believed it so deeply for such a long time. But it's not true. It's just not true. It's a lie. And there are some very simple truths we need to claim. Like I'm okay as I am. I'm human. I'm worthy just because I exist. These are very simple truths to claim. But one of the things that also happens in personal development, please tell me if I'm doing this is too much. There it is again, too much. There it is. It flies. It gets me sometimes. Some personal growth, personal development teaches what I call positive thinking or affirmations. So, you know, there might be something like, I'm not good enough. And then you replace that with, I'm amazing. Can you see that? I'm amazing. I'm not good enough becomes I'm amazing. Well, actually, neither are true. I'm amazing is a positive lie. Because sometimes I'm not amazing. Sometimes sometimes I'm fallible and I make mistakes. I'm not amazing. And I'm, you know, that we create positive lies and negative lies. And we need to keep it really real and simple and go, well, I'm a fallible, lovable, forgivable, acceptable, okay as I am human being, but I'm not better than anyone else. I'm not worse than anyone else. And positive thinking, I call it putting icing on dog shit and calling it a cake, because it's a problem. It's almost a psychological disease in our society. Be positive. Everyone says that about having cancer. Be positive. I don't feel positive about it. Positivity is no more helpful than negativity, in my view. Authenticity is where it's at. And sometimes I do amazing things, and sometimes I do really foolish things. And either way, I'm okay. That's truth. That's truthful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Makes a lot of sense.
So by being authentic, you can be positive and negative, and that's just your whole sort of makeup as a person.
Yeah, claim your shadow and your light, because none of us are perfect and none of us are awesome all the time. We're just not. But we are worthy all the time. We're worthy of love. We're worthy of forgiveness all the time. And we're okay just as we are. I say to my daughter, look, what you did was not okay, Gabriella, but you are okay. Always. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of unhelpful things being taught in the whole personal growth arena on this subject.
For sure. Yeah, you're not going to be present with something, and like you were mentioning earlier, if you're constantly trying to change a negative into a positive, then you're never actually spending time with it to deal with it.
And you're replacing one untruth with another untruth. And it creates more and more self-deception. What I'm interested in is smashing our self-deception. And when I run courses, and someone said to me the other day, you really confront people sometimes, but you do it so lovingly. How do you do that? And I said, I love the person and I confront the drama. I love the person, confront the deception. So if you love the person, you can say, you can be bold as bold can be with feedback, as long as you're for them. And you can distinguish who they are from how they're behaving. They're not the same thing. So if we can love each other and challenge ourselves and challenge how we deceive ourselves, that would be a very wonderful world to live in, I reckon.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, this is very powerful, information, and I feel like more people, certainly including myself, should be spending more time with these kinds of concepts. And you obviously are a wealth of information and knowledge, and within your books, obviously, as well. How can people listening now get some more information about the stuff that you're talking about, as well as from your, also maybe get hold of your books and or contact you on your blog?
Okay. My website is sophiesabage.com. Quite easy. So any events I'm running can be found on my website. My books can be found on the Cancer Whisperer. Well, both can be found on Amazon. The Life Shocks book is only out this June. It's published in the UK and Commonwealth at the moment. But I think you can get it on Amazon.com as well. It's just an English version. So Amazon is where you can get my books, as well as most retail outlets like Waterstones. I don't know what your bookstores are. They're easy to get. I'm on Facebook as the Cancer Whisperer. I have a group called the Cancer Whisperers, which anyone with cancer can join. I have a public page called Sophie Sabbage, the Cancer Whisperer. So I'm on Facebook, just look me up. And also moretolife.org is the organization I work with a lot and train courses. Those were usually on my events page as well, but if you want to find a course in your area, they're in America, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, the UK. It's a global organization. And moretolife.org shows all the courses in whatever area, and whoever teaches you this work will have integrity and be inspiring, and will be someone who walks the talk and lives what we teach. So whoever it is, whether it's me or someone else, you'll get a very good teacher.
Beautiful.
Sophie, I just wanted to finish off and say a huge thank you for coming on our podcast. I feel like you've taught me so much in this short space of time, and like made me rethink a few things, you know, personally, in terms of, you know, I guess just how I maybe think about myself and about other people and about particular situations and emotions too. The truth and the honesty thing was like, whoa, okay. Now I get it. And it's, it's been such a profound chat. You're
welcome.
Honestly, I know it's cold because I'm in London actually, and I know it's cold, but like I actually had goosebumps pretty much the most of the chat, just listening to what
you're welcome.
Said
you've given me about 2 hours of your time, so I hope you can edit it into something more digestible.
No, I mean the whole thing was really fantastic. But you are
welcome.
A truly wise and truly motivating and inspirational woman. And yeah, I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. The world certainly needs more people like yourself. I love that you are radically honest and that you're prepared to sort of put your neck on the line to be honest and to just say it how it is, because that is super important. And just wishing you absolutely all the best and absolutely everything you do. If there is any sort of collaboration in the future with yourself, I would love to sort of explore that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, firstly, thank you for inviting me. This has been one of my favorite interviews, because I'm often interviewed in 6 minutes or something. And to have two people go into this depth with me is just a real treat for me, to be able to speak at more depth and in more length than I often get to do. And let's stay in touch and see what opens up.
Awesome.
Thank you. And just briefly,
it's important, and let me know when you're going to broadcast the podcast.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, so just, Sophie, I don't want to go on too long, but I just have to say that it really was a profound chat, and you are larger than life in terms of your thinking and your presence and your just the way you project your feelings and your storytelling is so compelling. So thank you. And it comes from a place of such truthfulness. It really was moving. Like Gareth said, I totally felt the same way. So thank you. It's meant a lot to me personally, but I think everyone listening to this, whether you have cancer or not, whether you know someone or not with cancer, there's just so much to take from it. But that being said, there are a lot of people suffering and going through, they're not really sure how to deal with this stuff. And there are people like yourself that people can look up to and glean some information and understanding from. And that's really empowering. So thanks for that. And actually last week we spoke to two lovely ladies, Brianna and Christine, who they have a business called what is it called?
Catch Some Air.
Catch Some Air, that's right.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that.
And yeah, and it's all about these T-shirts going to youngsters that are diagnosed with cancer, because one of the girls, Christine, actually had cancer herself, and they're just using the money to really support and nurture youngsters. And I'd definitely love to put you guys in contact just to have a chat. There's always some value there. So thanks again for your time, and we look forward to.
You're welcome. Well, let's stay in touch, and thank you so much for what you're doing and your interest in all of this.
Cool. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
That's cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Waking at dawn, packing the gear, September tour and up in the air. Stop at the toll, digging for change.